All right, good whatever, morning, afternoon, evening, oceanography, if you're watching this, I hope you are. But this is going to be the screencast over fishing and aquaculture. And this is the presentations required for you to do your notes. So you can either watch this or you can just go through on your own. But when we're talking about fishing and aquaculture, we really got to talk about overfishing. This will tie into marine biology. And essentially, if you're overfishing at the top of the food chain and acidifying the ocean at the bottom, you're creating a squeeze that could evidently collapse the whole system. And so when we talk about fishing and aquaculture, talk about fish harvesting. So as the human population increased exponentially in the early 20th century, so did fish harvesting as well. And so the wild capture of fish reached a plateau in 1989, with fish farming accounting for most of the growth since then. And so overharvesting of fish has caused some fish stocks to collapse. So if you look there, what's in blue is wild capture, and what is green is what's aquaculture. And as you can see, aquaculture is actually taking over, or it's actually growing at a higher rate. And so again, this is only to 2010. Now this is 11 years old. So what a fishery is, it's an ecosystem where the concentration of certain fish is high enough for commercial harvesting. And so as you can see these different areas, the brighter the red, or the brighter the color that if you can see is where you're going to get a lot more fish. So fishing yield in tons per square kilometer. And so it could be fish, mollusk, or crustaceans. And so some of those yellow areas, not as productive, but then if you get in some of those darker reds, very productive. So as you can see here, for the U.S., excuse me, you can see the eastern seaboard, especially up towards Maine and whatnot, a little bit brighter red as opposed down into the Gulf. And so fisheries tend to be found near river mouths due to deposition nutrients, and then open ocean upwellings, and you should remember what an upwelling is. And so that's where you're going to tend to find good fishing. And so fishing methods, which we'll talk about, one of the earliest forms is pole fishing, and that's where a school of fish is attracted to a boat through use of bait. And probably most of you who have fished have done pole fishing. And so the fish enter a feeding frenzy and are pulled up out of the water one at a time using a fishing pole. And so this is in the Maldives. Longline fishing, which, oh, I lost my picture. Anyways, it's a commercial fishing technique where baited hooks are attached to a single long fishing line and it trails behind the ship. You're actually going to probably be doing some activity with long line fishing, but this can be kind of detrimental because with long line fishing, those hooks can get other animals. Purse seining, this deploys a large net over a school of fish, right? Sucks them up, and the top of the net's pulled together. And then drift netting, which is also very destructive, using long nets that span large expanse of open ocean. The fastest and most efficient way is trawling, and that's where essentially a large funnel-shaped net's dragged behind the ship. The net is weighted with chains or metal plates, but the issue with trawling, it scrapes the bottom of the ocean. And so as you can see here, this has some destruction due to a trawling. So it's essentially scraped the bottom of this benthic habitat. And so the other issue when we talk about several of these fishing methods is bycatch. And bycatch is when you have an unwanted fish, birds, and mammals that are caught alongside, and nearly 1/3 of the total annual fish catch is bycatch. So if you look in this image, you can see there's a shark in there, definitely a lot of shrimp. I don't know what they're trying to catch here, but definitely see some other crustaceans, looks like some horseshoe crabs. So this may be all bycatch, and those things are dead eventually. If they don't get back into the water soon enough, they're going to die. And so the rates of bycatch vary by fishing methods. So shrimp trawling, 62%, drift netting, 60, tuna long lining is about 28, tuna purse is about 5%, and then pole, you have a lot less of bycatch. Excuse me. So when we talk about fishing, we talk about sustainable fishing. So the maximal sustainable yield is the highest amount of species that can be harvested without diminishing the population for future years. And so when you hear about fisheries collapsing, it's because they've gone beyond that maximal sustainable yield. So overexploited fisheries are being harvested at unsustainable levels, and so what happens is you're taking out more out of the system than you're replacing. And so over time, these can become depleted. Fisheries with stocks so that fishing cannot be supported. So if you look here, there's fish mortality rates. We're not going to get into this math, the R over 2. But you can see not overfishing, overfishing, and there's that nice spot there in the middle. So a sustainability of fishery can also be evaluated based on what type of organisms are harvested. So aquatic communities organized like these on land with different trophic levels. If you remember from biology, talk about trophic level or places on a food chain. So TL1 producers phytoplankton and algae, right? TL2, herbivores, zooplankton. TL3, carnivores that eat herbivores, small fish, crustaceans, mollusks, those things. TL4, carnivores, medium-sized fish, and then you have your TL5, which are your apex predators. And so again, these are just showing your trophic. I'm sorry, TL means trophic level. So the marine trophic index is a measurement of the average trophic level of a total catch from a fishery. So in the early 1990s, the fishery industry in Newfoundland collapsed due to overfishing of cod, mature cod, which is a TL level 5, trophic level 5 fish, apex. And so fishing down the food chain describes a practice of targeting fish at decreasing trophic levels. So if the cod disappeared at that TL5, then you'd go after the ones at TL4 or TL3 and so on and so forth. And so if you look along the bottom, there's your year, there's your trophic level fishing. As you can see, catches from 1950 to 1990 mostly contained high trophic level fish. And then you can see there in the 90s when it collapsed. That's not good to be fishing at that lower level. Excuse me, a traditionally valuable species have declined. Some species of trash fish have been renamed or rebranded to make them more marketable. So trevally, which I think I'm saying, aka snotty nose, so they removed the snotty nose. Orange roughy, also known as a slimehead. Chilean seath bass was also known as the toothfish. Picote crab was also known as the mud crab. So they took these common names that, like, who'd want to eat a toothfish or a slimehead, and they make these nice, like, oh, Chilean sea bass, which is really toothfish. Or I'm going to eat some orange roughy. No, actually, it's called a slimehead. So anyways, you do you. Fishing regulations. Up to the 1960s, the only regulations of fishing were on territorial waters, so exclusive fishing zones that reached about 12 miles off each coastline. So those are considered territorial waters. Countries are not allowed to fish territorial waters of other nations without permission. So, for example, if the U.S. wanted to fish, if a U.S. fishing vessel wanted to fish in Canadian waters, they would not be allowed to fish 12 miles off each coastline. However, if they could get permission to fish within those 12 miles. We run into a lot of issues with this, especially with Russians, when we look at our territorial waters off Alaska. And so if you ever watch Bering, like a lot of those shows that take place in the Bering Sea, there's definitely some issues with territorial waters. 1982, a larger exclusive economic zone of about 200 miles was established along each nation's coastline. So now it's even harder to fish in other countries' waters. Now the Chinese, there was some last November, October, they're getting into some trouble, especially down in South America, by going into these economic zones where they're not supposed to fish. More about that in environmental science. So each nation has exclusive rights over all marine resources discovered within these zones, including fishing and oil extraction. The rest of the ocean is classified as international waters, so those areas that are in the lighter blue, meaning all nations have freedom to use them. However, the issue you run into is countries that are going into these economic exclusive zones. Many countries now establish restrictions on the amount of fish that can be harvested within their waters. And in the United States, we have annual catch limits or quotas that have been established at levels lower than the maximum sustainable yield, meaning fish stocks are able to recover. That's the plan. That doesn't always happen. These limits are enforced by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA, since 2012. But again, in areas out, in the middle of the Pacific, it's going to be hard to regulate these annual catch limits. So if we look here, overfishing limit, OFL, acceptable biological catch is the ABC, and the annual catch limit, the ACL. You can see catch and weight and kind of see how they come up with these numbers. So fully protected marine reserves, though, where no living organisms can be legally harvested, have also been established to protect areas especially high in biodiversity. So, for example, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park is the largest marine reserve. There is also, out in the Hawaiian Islands, we have a very large marine preserve. The Mariana Trench is a marine preserve. There's a protected area. Chagas protected area, Prince Edward Islands marine protected area. So if you look on here, you can see all these marine protected areas. The Marine Mammal Protection Act, which was passed in 1972 and banned the taking, importing marine mammals and products of marine mammals in the United States. So this required fishing fleets to modify their gear that allow mammals and other bycatch to escape. And so in spite of these laws, though, illegal fishing is widespread. Coastal developing countries often lack resources to patrol them, and so, or government officials have been bribed. We really do see issues with non-marine mammals, things like sharks. They're not a mammal, but shark fins have been an issue. So when we talk about this, we need to talk about aquaculture. And so aquaculture is a way that we have developed means to try to reduce our impact on fisheries. So as the limits of wild seafood have become increasingly clear, industries are now beginning to use aquaculture, and that's fish farming. And so as you can see, capture production, aquaculture is skyrocketing. And again, I probably should get a more updated graph. So most aquaculture work by taking eggs or mature fish and raising them in these fish pens. They feed and other supplements are added, waste drops to the bottom, and then these operations are vulnerable to many same issues as large animal farms, such as antibiotic resistance and manure. And so again, fish farming can be combined with hydroponics to create aquaponics. And again, another one where my picture's not there. I apologize. Aquaponics, they use wastewater from fish farms as a source of nutrients as it circulates through plant roots. So you have plants growing and they're using the waste from the fish also growing in the same pen to as a fertilizer. So I don't know how many labels you actually read, but any fish labeled as farmed was raised in aquaculture. And so you can cans of tuna, I think will say farmed. If you go into Kroger, it may say, I think it has to say farmed. But wild caught fish is just that. It's caught from a body of water. It's not farmed. So you can see there farm raised tilapia, wild caught cod. So MSC certification is a label. This is Marine Stewardship Council, is attached to any seafood that follows sustainable fishing practices. And so you can look for the MSC label. And then the Monterey Bay Aquarium has developed a seafood watch, which you're going to be doing. It's a program that rates different types of fish based on whether overfished or that farming method harms the environment. So you have best choice, good alternatives, and avoid. And you're going to be doing that for the activity here. So again, I took that entire presentation down to 11 minutes. Hopefully you find this helpful. So again, you have a choice. You can either watch this as you do the notes, or you can just go through the presentation. So this is me signing off from Room 102. Hopefully you found this helpful, and I will see you in class or on Zoom Doom or in a future YouTube video. Have a great one.